All right, today we're jumping into a story that's kind of an environmental mystery. It follows one person's journey to do everything right for the planet, only to stumble upon a secret that, well, that nobody seems to be talking about. It's a fascinating ride.
So let's get into it. The whole thing starts with a goal that I think a lot of us can relate to, right? Just wanting to do your part. Our main character in this story gets super inspired by films like An Inconvenient Truth and decides to completely change his life.
And he goes all in. I mean, the source actually calls him an obsessive-compulsive environmentalist. He's doing everything on this list. You know, the stuff we're all told to do. Separating the trash, composting, shorter showers, biking everywhere, the whole 9 yards. He was checking all the boxes. But there was a catch.
Because despite all that effort, the big picture wasn't changing. The planet's health just wasn't getting better. And that constant nagging feeling led him to ask this one huge question that really kicks off this entire investigation. What if the biggest problem was something everyone was completely overlooking?
And that brings us to this moment, the big awakening. It's wild, but the source says it all came down to a single link a friend posted online. A link to a report from the United Nations that would just completely flip his entire worldview upside down.
And here it is. This is the bombshell finding that started it all. The UN report found that animal agriculture, raising livestock for food, is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector combined.
Just let that sink in for a second. The scale of that comparison is what's so mind-blowing. I mean, think about all the exhaust from every single car, truck, train, boat, and plane on the entire planet. All of it. And according to this data, the system that produces our meat and dairy has an even bigger footprint. It's staggering.
And it gets even crazier, because it's not just about the amount of emissions, it's about how powerful they are. A big byproduct from livestock is methane, and over a 20-year time frame, methane is 86 times more destructive at trapping heat in our atmosphere than the CO2 that comes out of our cars. So it's like a super pollutant.
Okay, so you've got this massive, powerful source of pollution. The data seems pretty clear. So why isn't this the #1 thing every environmental group is talking about, right? This is where the story goes from a scientific discovery to a full-blown investigation.
So the guy in our story starts digging. He asks that exact question. Why are the biggest environmental groups in the world so quiet about this? He goes to the websites of all the big names, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, Rainforest Action Network. He's expecting to see animal agriculture on the homepage, right? But nothing. Crickets.
And it wasn't just that they weren't talking about it. They seemed to actively avoid talking about it. The source says his calls and emails were just met with a total wall of silence. He got ignored, stonewalled, and then he gets this email from Greenpeace basically saying, "Yeah, sorry, we can't help you with this." The plot just keeps thickening.
This bizarre silence from the experts made him think, okay, maybe this is about more than just greenhouse gases. The problem had to be deeper. So the investigation expanded to look at the total cost of animal agriculture on the planet.
And when they looked at water, wow, the numbers are just wild. Take the US, for example. You add up all the water we use in our homes, every shower, every toilet flush, washing dishes, everything, that's only 5% of the country's water consumption. Animal agriculture, on the other hand, uses 55%, a whopping 55%.
And if you want to put that into perspective, get this. The source calculates it takes over 660 gallons of water to produce just one hamburger patty. That's the same amount of water you'd use if you showered for 2 straight months for one burger.
Then they looked at land use, specifically the Amazon rainforest, the lungs of our planet. And the numbers here they're just as shocking. A staggering 91% of all Amazon destruction is to clear land for raising livestock. 91%.
And the list just keeps going. The source connects this one single industry to being the leading cause of a whole bunch of other horrible things. Species extinction, massive dead zones in our oceans, habitat destruction. It even links it to world hunger, because we're feeding over half of the world's grain to livestock instead of to hungry people. It's just a cascade effect.
All right, so you hear all that and you're probably thinking, okay, industrial farming is bad. I get it. But what about the good stuff? The sustainable, grass-fed, happy cow farms? Well, the investigation looks into that too.
And here's the catch with grass-fed. While it might sound way better, it trades one problem for another. Even bigger one, land. A lot of land. Since the cows aren't all packed together, they need huge areas to graze. We're talking up to 50 acres for one cow. The bottom line is, if we tried to feed the whole world this way, we'd literally run out of planet.
And look, you don't even have to take the filmmaker's word for it. In a pretty incredible moment, the source shows an interview with the CEO of an organic dairy company, and he straight up admits it. He says it's just not practical to think his sustainable model could ever feed the whole world. It's just not scalable.
So let's circle back. If the industrial system is this destructive and the sustainable alternatives can't solve the problem on a global scale, we're back to that central mystery. Why is nobody talking about this? Why the silence from the very people whose job it is to protect the planet?
While the source comes to a pretty chilling conclusion, it suggests the silence comes down to a mix of three big things. First, money. Environmental groups are worried they'll lose donations if they start telling people what to eat. Second, power. The animal agriculture industry has one of the most powerful lobbies on Earth. And third, and this is the really dark one, fear. Activists and journalists who do speak out get hit with lawsuits, they get labeled as terrorists, and they face serious threats.
And this really reframes the whole conversation. We hear a lot about the problem of human overpopulation, right? But the source argues the real issue is the population of the animals we eat. Get this, the world's 1.5 billion cows, just the cows, consume more food and water than all 7 billion people on the planet, combined.
And so we're left with the final, really challenging question that the source poses. After all of this, why are we so focused on changing light bulbs and taking shorter showers, but not what's on our plates? It really forces you to ask if we're ignoring the biggest piece of the puzzle, the literal cow in the room. And that question? Well, it changes everything.